Thank you. I feel a bit of an oddity here today in that I am both 72 years old and the new kid on the block. In high school, I sang in a small a cappella choir where every voice counted. I rehearsed at home. My mother had a wonderful ear for music, and she often admonished me for singing flat. At the performance, I saw her in the audience. She had her hand against her chest, her thumb up, the way she did when I was off key. I reacted by singing more softly, and the conductor gestured for me to sing out, so I returned to my normal volume. After the concert, Mama said, "Y'all were great. Did you see me giving you the thumbs up?" Even with the success of my first novel and the honor of winning the Sir Walter Raleigh Award, seeing criticism in the face of praise can slow my creativity to a halt. When doubts surface, I look at the note I have taped to the bottom of my monitor. Trust the process. Let go of the results. Was I aware of the wrong things happening around me as I grew up in the segregated South? No. As a teenager, I was into boys, swim team, plays, choir. After graduating from an all-white high school, I took a one-year secretarial course at an all-white college. I married at 19, had 2 children 15 months apart, and separated at 21. With my typing and shorthand, I entered the working world of Charlotte, North Carolina in 1961, where I discovered that business was run by men, that women made much less and were seldom in management. I accepted my lot, grateful that I could make enough to support me and my kids. But despite my lack of consciousness about it, my experiences resulted in themes that surface repeatedly in my writing: racism, motherhood, family dysfunction, alcoholism, and feminism. Kurt Vonnegut advised, "Write as much as you know as quickly as possible." I do indeed write what I know, but I don't do it quickly and never have. It took me 18 years to finish The Dry Grass of August. During that time, I suffered doubts that stopped me cold, followed often by months of not writing. Whenever I told my teacher, Laurel Goldman, that I had writer's block, she reassured me, "You're not blocked, you're in a fallow period." There's something so much gentler about fallow period than writer's block. Fallow, dormant, quiescent, unplowed. Synonyms that are benign compared with blocked, arrested, choked, thwarted. I now accept my fallow periods and have come to respect the process that works best for me. Compose a while, digest what I've done, read it when it's had time to cool, a couple of days or weeks or months. In the meantime, work on something else. A quote from Flannery O'Connor is appropriate here. "Writing a novel is a terrible experience during which the hair often falls out and the teeth decay." I'm always irritated by people who imply that writing fiction is an escape from reality. It is a plunge into reality, and it's very shocking to the system. Certainly for me, writing The Dry Grass of August was a plunge into reality, and perhaps my fallow periods occurred when the reality got too real. I remarried in 1965 and had a 3rd child. During these years, I wrote long letters to family and friends, a clue that the writer was budding within me. This was evidenced by my reluctance to send out a letter without keeping a copy. I have correspondence dating from the early 60s, smeared carbons, faded photocopies, even some I retyped because I couldn't bear to lose what I had said. Do you keep copies of your outgoing correspondence? Pay attention to that. It indicates that you love your own words and thoughts, and that's a fine thing. In 1970, Charlotte became a test case for integrating elementary schools with all deliberate speed, 16 years after the Supreme Court illegalized segregation. My older two children were on the first bus out of the suburbs, and my husband and I saw that their education was suffering in the formerly all-black elementary school that had been separate but never equal. So in 1972, we joined white flight by moving to Concord, North Carolina, where the schools were mostly still all white. But the social attitudes there were repugnant to me. I was appalled the day my 7th grader came home with a friend who casually used the N-word. And I began to discover where I stood politically. I started a series of journals that I've kept erratically up to today. My diaries are another sign of the wordsmith struggling to emerge, and I'm immensely grateful to have them as I use events of my life in my writing. After my second marriage ended, I returned to my hometown of Charlotte, where I wrote essays and short stories that I shared in creative writing courses at a community college. My reasons for taking the classes were less than straightforward. Initially, I signed up for them, hoping to meet men of the artistic, sensitive sort. What I hadn't counted on was the beginning of a love affair with words. In 1976, I became advisor to a senior high group at our Unitarian church, in which one girl, 16 at the time, asked me if I would look over her job application. In filling it out, Sheila had made only 2 mistakes. In the blank beside race, she'd put human, which she truly thought was the correct answer. Her other error, in the blank beside sex, she'd written no. I have thought often of Sheila, about the lessons she could have taught us if only we'd been ready to learn. When asked about race, I wish we all could respond human. Thank you. Thank you. My first serious effort at writing was for the Unitarian teenagers, 3 plays that were mostly derivative, but nonetheless original in concept. At the time, I ran a court reporting agency, and looking back on that work, I can see that recording testimony for days on end gave me an ear for dialogue and dialect that serves me to this day. In 1980, I went to work for Charlotte Opera as business and production manager, and in my 5 years with the company, I developed a passion for the dramatic elements of plot and character. I also became acquainted with the work of Robert Penn Warren when we staged the opera Willie Stark, based on Warren's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, All the King's Men. In the years that followed, I grew to love Warren's writing, and his poetry in particular. My father died in 1985, only a couple of months after my story, In the Garden, was published in the anthology, Writers of the Future. And I did what any intelligent writer will tell you not to do. Do not sell a short story and quit your day job. But I did. I left the opera and moved to Chapel Hill in the middle of North Carolina, where I discovered that what I most wanted to write about was Charlotte. As is true for many writers, I had to get away from my hometown before I could explore my feelings about it. In 1987, I joined the writing group that my teacher Laurel Goldman runs in Chapel Hill, that I am still in today, and I began The Dry Grass of August. Over the years it took me to finish it, I suffered a lot of doubt. I knew I was telling family stories that might not be well received by my close kin. In 1999, I gave my mother my first draft, trusting her with it because I knew she was a discerning reader. She returned it the next day, having read only 2 chapters, and she said, "I hope I'm dead before you publish that book." She added, "Your father wasn't an alcoholic or a philanderer." And she would not hear me when I declared that the Bill Watts of my novel is not the Frank Mayhew of real life. Mama died in 2004. Today, I'm certain she would love my book and be proud of me, even if I cut too close to the bone for her comfort. Why am I sure of this? When I was in high school, someone gave me a copy, battered, of Lady Chatterley's Lover, a book so scandalous it was banned between 1930 and 1959. But there were copies around, one of which circulated among my friends with pages paper-clipped and dog-eared, and with the sexually explicit passages marked. When I left for school, I hid the book where? Under the mattress. You got it. Then that morning, Mama changed the sheets. I came home to find the book on my bed with a note pinned to it. I hope you read the good parts too. In 2007, when my agent was seeking a publisher for my novel, which was then called Steal Away Home, I discovered that there were several books published under that title. So I turned to the poetry of Robert Penn Warren and came upon a piece called Starfall. It is essentially a love poem, but it includes lines that evoke the mood of my book and the phrase, the dry grass of August. In August 2009, Kensington bought my book in a 2-book deal. A dream come true for a debut novelist. During the final editing, I was checking various quotes for accuracy. In chapter 26, Reverend Perkins reads from the King James Bible, Isaiah 5. Therefore, as the fire devoureth the stubble and the flame consumeth the chaff. When I took a Bible from my bookshelf to check that quote, I was startled to read a different wording. Therefore, as the tongue of fire devours the stubble, and as dry grass sinks down in the flame. I had grabbed the Revised Standard Version instead of the King James. A mistake? Perhaps. Or maybe that verse was in my unconscious memory from my Presbyterian Sunday school childhood. Regardless, it was a gift, and it underscored for me that I had finally found the best title for my book. Dry grass evokes images of tinder, ready to burst into flames in the heat of late summer, or in the fevered anger that swept the South and the nation in the aftermath of Brown versus Board of Education. But as you can see, I planned none of that. I just recognized the title when I stumbled onto it. Flannery O'Connor also said, speaking of writers, "You shall know truth, and the truth shall make you odd." I have that on a filing cabinet next to my computer. I interpret that to mean that it's my job to make readers uncomfortable. When I try to adapt certain truths to make them palatable, I lose my conviction for the themes I mentioned earlier. My writing gets flat and dull until I return to the truth about the inequities I've observed. Comparatively, I've lived a life of privilege. There have certainly been times when, as a single mother working at clerical jobs, I didn't know where the next meal was coming from. But I've never been homeless or even close to it. I'm from an upper-class family and I'm comfortably well off. Don't tell my publisher. I want to. So I'm not sure why I'm drawn to write about the disenfranchised, other than the obvious. I grew up in Charlotte under the Jim Crow laws that enforced strict segregation, and those topics still captivate me. My writing is the strongest and clearest, and to address Flannery's meaning, the truest, when I'm writing about that time and that place, or as Vonnegut put it, writing what I know. Here's a scene from my novel in progress, so I'm breaking the rule. I'm going to read something to you. Tomorrow's Bread. The setting is the bedroom of an inner-city apartment in Charlotte in 1967. The dialogue is between Eben Polk, pastor of St. Timothy's Second Baptist Church, and Harold Tilley, the former pastor. So I'm going to read you a story. Eben thought about Pastor Tilley's last words, spoken as Eben sat at his bedside, wanting to leave the sour, dry smell that aroused memories. Across the room, on the top of a chest of drawers, was covered with pill bottles, and Eben wondered who managed them for Tilley. At 96, wasted by cancer, his mind murky, Harold Tilley hadn't been able to name anyone who should be notified of his coming demise, other than longtime parishioners. You tell Sister Monroe, she get the word out. I already did. Everyone's praying for you. With a wheezing laugh, the ancient preacher replied, save they prayers for those what need 'em. I'm ready to go, ready to go. Eben believed him. He'd never known anyone as genuinely devout as Harold Tilley, the minister who had led the congregation for over 50 years. Harold lifted a skinny finger, growled out a word Eben didn't understand. Important. Eben heard, impotent. Harold spoke again. Impotent. Gotta tell you something important about the sanctuary. Eben had become used to the old man's patois, a fitting word given Tilley's origins in the South Carolina Low Country, Geechee, Gullah. At first foreign to Eben's educated ear, but he had come to love the sound of the dialect. They's papers I's not showed you. Eben leaned closer. Papers? Records. They was kept secret, then forgot about. A thing seemed vital. Then folks die or forget. Come enough years, what was worth keeping secret don't matter no more. Eben had learned to sit quietly while Tilley rambled. Slaves ran off, you know? Eben nodded. Ken might say they was dead and point to a new grave. The old man's wrinkled hand smoothed the covers over his chest. Weren't dead, just run off. But who wants to dig up a grave? Happened, not often. Eben began to understand. The cemetery. Uh-huh. Not all those markers tell the whole truth. Tilley stared at the wall behind Eben's head. His eyes, his awful yellow eyes, moving from left to right as if he were reading a message written there. There's a marker, JTQ. Eben remembered a gray pock-marked stone about a foot square, lichen-covered, but the initials carved so deep they were still readable. The grave was a depression near the back wall of the cemetery behind St. Tim's. He'd sat down beside it one bright day and scrubbed the stone to see if there was anything else beside the 2-inch high letters, JTQ. He'd found a date, but didn't know if it marked birth or death, or, as was too often true of infants 150 years ago, both. His best guess was 1825, although the 8 might have been a 9. He spoke aloud. JTQ, 1825. That right, you seen it. John Thomas Quarry. But in 1926, Tilley made a grunting, coughing sound, clearing his throat as he did often. Wonder what came of him. You mean how he died? Oh, yeah, I reckon he is dead now all that time. He a fine man, good friend. Harold, you're not making sense. The man's grave, not his grave, just his marker. In a complicated series of moves, as if every motion hurt, Tilley rolled over, away from Eben. The register's got everything, all about it, in a trunk, in the cellar, back of the coal bin, still there. The old man sighed as if the exchange had worn him out and was asleep within seconds. As soon as Eben got back to the church, he went to the basement and stood facing the huge coal storage bin, the solid brick wall behind it, no room for a trunk or anything thicker than a sheet of paper. Tilley died the next morning, never having said another word. Eben couldn't let go of a bothersome certainty that the old man had told him something important. So we have 2 preachers talking about graves in the cemetery behind St. Timothy's Baptist. The passage raises questions. How did a Catholic saint from the 1st century in Anatolia, now Turkey, come to be associated with the Baptist Church in Charlotte, North Carolina in the early 1800s. And what's behind the coal bin? Fascinating stories are implied, and if I trust my own creative process, Pastor Polk will tell them to me. So here we are in 2012, almost 58 years after the end of apartheid in America. And where are we? In 1954, Annie Black, admitted to the medical clinic my family went to, would have entered by the back door. Today, in those same facilities, the doctors may well be African Americans. In 1954, there were laws against miscegenation. Today, it's likely that all of you know of at least one interracial marriage. My first book, which is set in that year, tells of segregated restaurants, toilet facilities, motels. There was even a white ocean. Today, such things are not just illegal, they are unimaginable. But I'm still drawn to tell stories about them. And I have my ears open for anything I can use. So be on your guard around writers. We should all wear t-shirts declaring, "Careful, or you'll wind up in my novel." Recently, my sister told me what she heard someone say, and I will put this in the dialogue of one of my characters. "Now you know I'm not racial." I'll close with more words from Vonnegut, who advised in A Man Without a Country. If you really want to hurt your parents, go into the arts. I'm not kidding. The arts are not a way to make a living. They are a very human way of making life more bearable. Practicing an art, no matter how well or badly, is a way to make your soul grow, for heaven's sake. Sing in the shower, dance to the radio, tell stories, write a poem to a friend, even a lousy poem. Do it as well as you possibly can. You will get an enormous reward. You will have created something. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I would love to have, we've got a little bit of time for questions. I would love to have some. This is my favorite part of speaking with people. I'll point to you. Yes, back there.
What kept you going?
Is that Mark?
Yeah. What kept you going those 18 years?
Oh, determination. I had beat my, pardon?
A lot of people have that.
Well, I had beat myself up for procrastination. That was the word I used the most. And the night that my teacher introduced me, this tells you what a good teacher she is, when my book debuted, she said, she used a different P word. Excuse me, it makes me emotional. She said she persevered in spite of her doubts. So I guess that's it, Mark. When I got doubts, I'd stop, and I couldn't bear to give up the story. Yes?
Well, I haven't read your book yet, but if you're as good a writer as you are a speaker,
Oh. Thank you. Thank you. What a lovely thing to hear. I really appreciate it. Yeah. Oh, thanks. Well, they said not to do a reading, and I had already planned it, so I... Yes.
I have read your book,
Oh,
and I want to comment if I may, because I told you this last night.
okay.
Through Meredith to help.
I can't see you. Who is it?
Meredith,
Yes.
I have read the help as well, and yours is far better.
Oh. Oh. Thank you, Meredith. That really, I've been compared a lot, and I like for my book to stand out. I don't want it to be better than somebody else's. I don't like that feeling, but I love hearing that. Thank you.
There's a question way over there.
Way over? Oh, yes.
Oh, I wanted to ask you about what you just read to us.
Uh-huh.
How far along are you in that novel? And why did you take us?
I need it for me. I needed to read it out loud. Reading aloud, by the way, those of you who are in writing groups, I think I read Dry Grass of August through 4 complete times to my writing group. And then they read it twice and did everything from copy editing to overarching things. But reading aloud makes them come alive to me. And as you can tell, I love to do voices. I hear my characters' voices, and I like to imitate them. There's a big ham in me. So. And it's called Tomorrow's Bread, and that title will stick. That's going to be my title no matter what. And it's from a poem by Langston Hughes in a group of poems he wrote under the Dream Deferred category in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And it was from a poem called Freedom that he gets really vocal and says, I have entitlement and I have the right as much as you do, but they keep telling me tomorrow is another day. I cannot live on tomorrow's bread. I said, there's my title. Yeah.
And what's the deadline for that?
Oh. Was that my son? It is, it's my son. I'm going to talk to you afterward. Well, the month of August seems to figure in my life. It's due in August. And I will turn something in August. I have about 100 pages done. But I've applied for 2 residencies this summer. I do my best writing when I'm off. One of them has no internet, and that will help me. You can get it, but you have to go to great lengths to get it. So I hope by August I'll have 150 to 200 pages, and I'll let them have it. They'll know it's not full and not finished and not edited. To me, rewriting, revision is the finest part of writing. I love it. I think we're close to out of time. Do I have? Okay. I can't really see, so shout out. Okay.
It seems to me that one of the many things that your wonderful book accomplishes is to help us remember that not all obstacles have been overcome. Okay. So that
Thank you.
In this great country of ours, there are still big country clubs and
Yeah.
sororities and fraternities that exclude people because of racial or ethnic background.
Yeah.
And that right here in Alabama, a populist demagogue slanders black people in taped phone conversations. So we still have obstacles to overcome, and I think your wonderful book helps highlight that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah. I have recently had the pleasure of speaking in a couple of senior high classes, junior and senior creative writing classes. My book seems to have crossed over, thank goodness, to young adult literature. And it appalled me when we went to lunch and I saw the blacks on one side and whites on the other. That just really bothered me. I thought, kids, get together. And I think in many schools they do, but not that school. Anything else? Yes? Okay.
Comment about it being compared to the Help.
Uh-huh.
But it was also compared to The Secret Life of Bees.
Yes.
And even the first review or time that I heard about it, it was the next To Kill a Mockingbird.
Yeah. Thank you.
What type of pressure was that?
Amanda said she has read reviews where it's been compared to The Help and to The Secret Life of Bees and even to Kill a Mockingbird, which takes my breath away. And you said, what kind of pressure is that? You know what? Early on, that would have really been pressure. It's not now. I know now about my life that I am a writer, and that is my calling, and I do it well. I mean, it almost sounds braggadocio to say that, but you got to know that, because it's a lonely life. You're sitting off in a room, you're facing yourself, you're facing a blank screen. You know, they say writing is easy. You just sit there facing a blank piece of paper till drops of blood form on your forehead. So I no longer shy away from saying, I know that I have mastered my craft. It's up to me now to get these stories that just in my head. So I can't let comparison stop me, or it would stop me dead cold. Anything else? Thank you so much. This has been great. Thank you. Thank you.